Now, we certainly did not start off on good footing, notwithstanding the wonderful language in the Declaration of Independence about all men being created equal. When we got to the Constitution, we actually had provisions protecting slavery. And it ultimately took a civil war to end slavery. And finally, we got the 14th Amendment, which the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, and the 14th Amendment provided for the equal protection of the law.
There is a historic legacy of Latino communities which were settled by whites and historically denied all or some of their rights. So I am talking about when the United States intentionally, in an unjust war, took the 55% of Mexico and made it the 1/3 of the United States.
We have this gap in resources that has resulted from back in the 1700s, the 1600s. How do you right that gap? So I think we can talk about environmental justice, right? And the asthma rates and cancer rates in communities of color.
The other irony for me, Michael, and I may be wrong, it's just an opinion, Black people are so patriotic. They as one of the big NBA players said the other day, we love America. Why doesn't America love us? The Black soldiers who went to World War II, who proudly served in the Civil War to prove that I'm an American, and yet nothing. How sad. What else do Black people have to do to prove that they are good citizens?
When I was thinking about the 14th Amendment, I actually talk a lot about the 14th Amendment in the classes I teach because some of my favorite American cases come out of the 14th or revolve around the 14th Amendment. So things like Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education, the Loving case, Griswold versus Connecticut, which had to do with reproduction rights, right? Loving versus Virginia, all of these cases have to do with how groups are treated under the law. And I believe in my heart that we have made progress in this country towards actualizing more social equity and justice. However, I think we have a tremendous path that's very long still ahead of us.
The Constitution is not a perfect document. The people who wrote it were not perfect. There are many ways we still need to fix the Constitution. The Electoral College doesn't make sense. Okay, as a perfect example of that. There should be express rights to privacy and maybe express rights to a quality education. So, but it also has some good things in it about freedom of speech, about protecting us against unreasonable searches and seizures, about equal protection of the laws. There are good things there. Okay? But it has always been true that, it has been a struggle for us to live up to those ideals.
I'm a proud American, and I love the structure of democracy that we have these three different branches of government. But it saddens me to wake up and find out that the Supreme Court made it possible to ignore the 14th Amendment. They made it legal to ignore the 14th Amendment. They gave law enforcement the power to be a law unto themselves. And it has always been used against Black and brown people. And I don't say that as a whiny Black person. I say that on behalf of all the people that went before the Supreme Court and were told, no, they were justified in what they did.
Today, I don't see a difference. This century-old legacy colors the law in southern states, even up to now. I remember this famous sheriff, Arpeggio, that decided that he gave this regulation. Whoever you think that is Hispanic, you can stop him or her. He has to show papers to you. Only because you think they are Hispanic. What do that mean? do whatever you want.
Say with Brown versus Board of Education, which occurred 1954 with a court case from right here in Delaware. I mean, that was great, but the aftermath of Brown versus Board of Education created all of these other issues. For instance, we have higher levels of educational segregation today in our schools than we did before Brown versus Board of Education was passed, right? So how do we have a court case that says, hey, we're going to integrate, or integration is key, you can't keep groups separate just based on race, that's unconstitutional, but then all these years later, you have higher levels of segregation.
The people with the ultimate responsibility for making our country ever more perfect, for pushing us towards the ideal place we want to be, is ultimately the citizenry. Okay, that's why the first three words of the Constitution are "we the people." It's not "we the Supreme Court justices." It's not "I the president."
Until we do reform along with the movement, and that movement involves bringing the citizens together in a long-term, consistent conversation to build up a public consensus that this is an area where we have to change.
Ultimately, it is up to all of us as voters, as citizens, as people with a voice who could speak the truth and advocate for a better society, to make our society the society that we all know it should be. A society that establishes justice, as they say in the preamble of the Constitution, and ensures the blessing of liberty to all of us in this generation and to our posterity, to all future generations.